Caleb Morton had lived on the edge of the Arizona hills for most of his life, and to him the land felt like an old friend. Every morning he stepped outside his wooden ranch house, breathed in the warm, dry air, and listened to the soft calls of doves resting on the fence rails. The ranch stretched across wide open space, a patchwork of grasses, dusty paths, and the long shadows of cottonwood trees. Beyond the fields, not too far away, the ground dipped into a deep canyon that curved like a long scar across the earth. Caleb often rode near the canyon during his cattle rounds, though he never explored it closely. Something about the silence there felt heavy, as though the wind itself chose not to disturb it. Caleb was a thoughtful man, quiet around strangers but gentle with animals and patient with the slow pace of ranch life. People in the nearby town of Red Crossing often said he had a calm way about him, and this reputation made him well respected. But even with his quiet nature, he paid close attention to changes around his land. For several weeks during that summer, he had noticed unusual things, faint footprints near the creek that were not from cattle or local wildlife, and small rings of ash that looked like the remains of campfires. They were old, scattered, and harmless, yet they made him curious. Caleb knew the land belonged to more than just him. It had a long history connected to the White Sparrow Apache band, whose traditional grounds bordered his ranch. Their presence was not new. What was new was the tone of the whispers traveling through the town. People in Red Crossing had been talking more than usual. Shopkeepers, ranch hands, and even children carried bits of gossip like seeds that flew from person to person. Someone claimed they saw tiny lights glowing near the canyon at night. Another said they heard soft, drum-like sounds carried by the wind. Others dismissed it as stories made bigger by boredom, especially during the slow, hot months when the sun seemed to press down on everything. But the talk created a soft uneasiness that settled over the town like dust. Red Crossing itself was a small but lively place. Its single main road was lined with wooden buildings, each a little weathered from sun and wind. There was the general store with its wide porch and rocking chairs, the small post office that doubled as a message center, and the cafe where travelers stopped before heading farther west. People depended on each other there. Everyone knew everyone else, for better or worse, and it was this closeness that made news real or imagined spread faster than a summer storm. Caleb visited the town every week for supplies. He usually stayed quiet, greeting folks with a nod instead of long conversations. But one afternoon, when he pushed open the door to the general store, the room fell oddly silent. A few men stood near a display of canned goods, their expressions tight with curiosity. Mrs. Tyndall, the storekeeper, glanced at Caleb and quickly looked away. The air felt thick, as if everyone had paused in the middle of a secret. A tall man finally spoke. "Caleb, you're the closest to that canyon. You seen anything strange up there?" Caleb shook his head slowly. "Nothing out of the ordinary," he replied, though the footprints and old ash rings returned to his mind. Still, they did not seem worth mentioning. They did not feel threatening, only unusual. The men exchanged looks but said nothing more, and Caleb continued gathering his supplies. As he walked back to his horse, he wondered why the town was so unsettled. Rumors could grow like weeds, tangled and distracting, yet they often had a small truth at their root. Still, he had lived long enough to know that not everything needed solving the moment it appeared. Some things revealed their purpose in their own time. That evening the sky turned a soft pink, and the warmth of the day slowly faded. Caleb saddled his horse, a steady bay named Willow, and set off across the ranch to check the northern fence line. Willow's hooves tapped gently against the dry earth. The sound was familiar, steadying. Caleb felt at peace, as he always did during these quiet rides. The world seemed simpler when the horizon stretched endlessly, and the problems of the town were far behind him. But as he approached the far edge of his property, he caught sight of something unexpected, a figure standing still near the canyon ridge. His first instinct was caution, not fear. The land was open, and people sometimes passed through. Yet something about the stillness of the figure, the way she faced the canyon rather than the open fields, made him slow Willow's pace. As he drew closer, he realized it was a young woman, dressed in traditional Apache clothing, with dark braids resting over her shoulders. She stood tall and graceful, her posture calm but alert. She turned when she heard the horse's steps, and her eyes met Caleb's with a quiet strength he had not expected. Caleb brought Willow to a gentle stop and tipped his hat politely. "Evening," he said softly. The woman nodded. Her expression carried neither fear nor worry, only purpose. "My name is Tala," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and steady as running water. Caleb introduced himself in return, though she clearly already knew who he was. The Apache community paid close attention to the land, and his ranch lay very near their boundaries. Tala looked back toward the canyon and then returned her gaze to him. There was something thoughtful in her eyes, something that made Caleb feel the moment was important. "You ride near this place often," she said. Caleb nodded. "I check the fence line. Cattle wander if I don't." Tala stepped closer, still keeping a respectful distance. "There is a place ahead," she said slowly, pointing toward the deep shadow where the canyon dipped. "A place our people do not cross. It is old, very old." Her tone held a weight that made Caleb sit straighter in his saddle. She was not speaking of simple stories. There was meaning here, deep, quiet meaning. "What's wrong with it?" Caleb asked gently. Tala hesitated, choosing her words with care. "It is not wrong," she said. "It is protected, and it must remain untouched." Caleb followed her gaze toward the canyon. The setting sun cast long beams of light that made the rock walls glow. He had always found the place strangely beautiful. Though he rarely lingered near its edge, the silence there was too thick, too complete, as though sound itself did not belong. Tala continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That is forbidden." The words seemed to float in the air between them, soft but firm. They were not meant to frighten, only to warn. Caleb felt a quiet chill, not of fear, but of understanding. He had grown up hearing bits of Apache stories, though never directly from their people. Hearing the warning now, spoken with sincerity, gave the old tales new life. "I haven't gone down there," Caleb said. "And I don't plan to." He paused, then added, "But others might." Tala nodded slowly. "Yes, we have heard talk. People from the town. New plans. New roads." She lowered her gaze for a moment, as if weighing the importance of what she wanted to share. "There are things beneath that land that should never be uncovered." Caleb did not know what those things were, but he recognized truth in her voice. Something inside him, some quiet instinct, told him to listen closely. Tala lifted her eyes again. "I came to tell you because your land touches that place. You are near it more often than others. And you pay attention." Caleb felt a small warmth in his chest at her words. He respected the land deeply. He cared for it. Hearing that she had noticed this mattered more than he expected. "I thank you for your warning," he said quietly. Tala nodded once more, and then stepped back, blending naturally into the soft golden light of evening. For a moment, the world felt still, peaceful. But beneath that calm was a feeling he couldn't name, a sense that something was beginning. Something he did not yet understand. As Caleb rode back toward his ranch house, the words, "That is forbidden," echoed gently in his mind, not as a threat, but as a soft reminder that some places held stories far older than any town, any road, or any ranch. And he sensed, in a way he could not explain, that Tala's warning would soon matter more than either of them yet knew. Caleb woke early the next morning with Tala's quiet warning still resting in his thoughts. The sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of his room, painting soft golden shapes on the wooden floor. Normally he enjoyed the slow rhythm of his mornings, feeding the horses, checking the wells, walking through the barn to make sure everything was in order. But that day, something felt different. There was a gentle pressure in the air, as though the land itself waited for him to understand something important. He moved through his chores, but his mind kept drifting back to the canyon and the seriousness in Tala's voice. She had spoken without fear, without anger, without hesitation. Her words had carried a sense of history, of responsibility, as though she was passing along a message not just from herself, but from generations before her. Caleb had always respected the Apache communities, though he had rarely spoken to anyone from them directly. Their quiet connection to the land had always felt genuine, deeper than anything the town of Red Crossing ever acknowledged. After tending to Willow and giving fresh feed to the cattle, Caleb saddled up for his usual ride. He told himself it was simply to check the fences, but he knew the canyon would be on his mind the entire time. The morning was peaceful, with the sky a soft blue and the breeze warm but gentle. As Willow carried him across the open fields, Caleb noticed how still everything seemed. It reminded him of a moment right before rain, not stormy, just expectant. When he reached the north side of his ranch, he paused for a long time, looking out toward the distant outline of the canyon. It looked ordinary from far away, just another piece of land, shaped by time. Yet now it held a different weight. Tala had said the place was protected, not forbidden out of fear, but out of respect. That distinction lingered with him. He guided Willow along the fence line, checking for loose posts. Everything looked normal, until he spotted a wooden stake driven into the ground near the canyon's edge. It was tall, thin, and had a piece of bright red cloth tied to the top. Caleb dismounted slowly and walked over to inspect it. The stake wasn't his. It wasn't from the Apache community either. Its design was different. It looked like the ones used by land surveyors. He knelt beside it, brushing dirt away with the back of his hand. A faint set of numbers and markings were carved into the wood. They were measurements, land measurements. Someone had been here recently, marking the area. Caleb frowned softly. He remembered the talk in town about new roads and railway plans. The merchants and business owners had been excited, hoping the railroad company might choose a route passing near Red Crossing. More travelers meant more customers, more goods, and more money. But to Caleb, the idea had always felt rushed. Railroads changed everything. They brought noise, structures, and strangers who did not know or respect the land. He stood slowly, the warm wind lifting the red cloth and making it flutter like a small warning flag. If surveyors were placing stakes this close to the canyon, it meant they were planning to pass through the very land Tala had spoken about. And if they did not know the importance of that place, they might disturb something they did not understand. Caleb took a deep breath, feeling a mix of concern and responsibility settle in his chest. He needed more information. So instead of returning home, he turned Willow toward town. Red Crossing was already bustling when he arrived. Wagons rolled along the main road, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the cafe. But beneath the normal sounds of everyday life, there was a different kind of energy, excited, hurried, almost restless. People were gathered in small groups, talking in low but eager voices. Caleb tied Willow near the post office and walked toward the general store, where he heard the most chatter. As he entered, he noticed a large map spread across the counter. 3 men stood around it, pointing at different sections. They looked up as Caleb approached. "Well, morning, Caleb," said Mr. Harland, one of the merchants. He offered a friendly smile, but his eyes carried a spark of ambition. "Looks like we're going to be part of something big." Caleb glanced at the map. A bold line ran straight across the area near his ranch, including the canyon. "What's all this?" he asked. Harlan tapped the map proudly. "Railroad surveyors came through yesterday. They say this route might work. Imagine it, Red Crossing becoming a stop on the new rail line. It could change everything for us," a younger man beside him added. "They started marking the land already. You might have seen their stakes." Caleb nodded slowly. "I did. Well," Harlan continued, "they'll be back in a day or two to take more measurements. Then the company decides if the route is good enough for construction." Caleb's brows drew together gently. "And if the land they're marking isn't suitable?" Harlan shrugged. "Then they'll make it suitable." Caleb felt a quiet discomfort grow inside him. "That canyon isn't just any land," he said softly, careful with his words. "It has history. Deep history." The men exchanged amused glances. "Land is land, Caleb," Harland replied. "You ranchers understand that better than anyone." Caleb paused, choosing patience over argument. Some places carry stories we shouldn't ignore, he said calmly. Harlan chuckled lightly. Well, unless those stories come with dollars attached, I doubt the railroad will change its plans. Caleb knew then that trying to convince them with words alone would not work. They had already decided what they wanted to see. The excitement of new opportunities had made them blind to caution. Leaving the store, Caleb walked slowly toward the cafe, thinking deeply. The townspeople were not bad-hearted. They simply believed progress was always good. But they did not live beside the canyon. They did not see how still it became at certain hours, how the air around it held a kind of timeless quiet, and they had not spoken to Tala, who carried the knowledge of her community with gentle certainty. Caleb sat at an outdoor table and ordered a cup of coffee. As he waited, he watched people passing by, faces he had known for years. They were hopeful, dreaming of change, unaware of the possible impact on the land they shared. When he returned to his ranch that afternoon, the shadows were growing long. He guided Willow through the familiar fields, but his thoughts were anything but calm. He stopped near the barn, letting the horse drink from the trough. The warm light of the setting sun painted everything in a peaceful glow. But Caleb did not feel peaceful. He needed to speak with Tala again. The next morning, he rode toward the edge of his land, hoping she or someone from her community might be nearby. The canyon waited in its silent expanse, unchanged and quiet. Caleb scanned the area, unsure whether to call out or simply wait. Then he noticed a figure approaching from the east, walking with steady steps, carrying a small woven bag. It was Tala. She stopped a few feet away, offering a gentle nod. "You found the markers," she said. Not as a question, but as a certainty. "Yes," Caleb replied. "They're planning to bring the railroad through here." Tala looked toward the canyon, her expression calm but thoughtful. "We feared this might happen," she said. "Change often arrives before understanding." Caleb felt a small sense of relief. "Tell me, Tala, why is the land beyond the canyon so important? Why must it stay untouched?" She was quiet for a moment, not avoiding the question, but giving it respect. "It is a place of rest," she said. "A place where old things sleep. Not dangerous, just sacred." "Some things are meant to remain still," Caleb nodded slowly. "Town leaders won't listen to me," he admitted. "They want the progress the railroad brings." Tala's expression did not harden, but grew more thoughtful. "Then the truth must be shown, not told." She paused, then added softly, "And you may have a part in that." Caleb did not fully understand her meaning, but he felt the weight of it. Something was coming, something the town was not prepared for. And the quiet warning she had given him before was only the beginning. For the first time, Caleb felt the conflict rising around him, like a gentle wind beginning to shift directions. Change was on its way, and he was standing at the center of it not by choice, but by the simple fact that he listened when others did not. Surveyors arrived early the next morning, riding into the open land with measuring tools, notebooks, and bright-colored flags tied to long wooden stakes. Caleb watched them from a distance as he sat on Willow's saddle, the morning sun warm on his back. He did not approach right away. Instead, he observed the way they walked the land, stepping across the grass without pausing to feel anything underneath. Their voices carried through the still air, confident, busy, eager for progress. They spoke of numbers, routes, deadlines. None of their words had room for old stories or quiet warnings. Two of the surveyors walked close to the canyon's edge. Caleb felt a small knot form in his stomach when he saw one of them kick aside a stone shaped like a thin oval. It rolled gently toward the canyon, stopping just before the drop. The man did not notice it, or maybe he noticed and simply did not care. Caleb knew then that he could not wait. He guided Willow forward. The surveyors turned as he approached, offering polite smiles. Most had met Caleb before during earlier visits to town, and they knew him as a dependable rancher who rarely caused trouble. One man, wearing a brown hat and carrying a map tube under his arm, stepped forward. "Morning, Mr. Morton," he said cheerfully. Beautiful day for measurements. Caleb returned a polite nod. Morning. You're planning to run your line right through here? The man grinned. If the numbers look good. Yes. The company wants the straightest route. Cuts time. Saves money. Caleb looked toward the canyon. This area might not be as simple as it looks. The man laughed lightly. Land is land. It behaves if you treat it right. Caleb felt a quiet urge to disagree, but he knew arguing would not work. These men were here to do a job, not to listen to concerns they believed were based on superstition. He tried again, gently. There's history here. Important history. The man nodded politely, but his eyes showed he didn't place much value on the words. We understand. We'll be respectful. But unless there's something solid, something official, the route stays as planned. Caleb's heart sank a little. Some things are official in ways that don't get written on paper, he said softly. The man sighed kindly. I know you mean well, Mr. Morton. Caleb realized the conversation was ending, whether he liked it or not. He rode away slowly, but his thoughts were far from calm. Later that afternoon, he returned to his ranch and stood near the barn, thinking deeply. Tala had said the truth must be shown, not told. He wondered what she meant. He felt caught between two worlds, one driven by progress, the other shaped by memory, respect, and stories older than anyone alive. The next day, a group of townspeople came to see the survey work. They gathered near the canyon, talking in loud, excited voices. Children pointed at the measuring tools, and the adults spoke with confidence about new business opportunities. Caleb listened quietly from a distance. He did not want to disrupt their happiness, but he felt uneasy, knowing how close they were to disturbing something sacred. As the survey team hammered stakes into the ground, one of the workers shouted, "We hit something!" People gathered around quickly. Caleb approached slowly, unsure what they had found. The worker brushed away dust with his hands until a stone slab became visible. It was smooth, flat, and engraved with curved lines, forming a pattern unlike anything the townspeople had seen. The lines connected like flowing water, looping around a symbol at the center. The surveyors looked confused. One of them bent down and said, "Maybe it's just old art." Caleb felt something shift inside him. The slab wasn't decorative. It was deliberate, placed with purpose. A few townspeople whispered about treasure. Others thought it might be a sign from ancient travelers. The children watched in fascination. Unaware of the deeper meaning, Caleb leaned closer to the stone. The engraving reminded him of the way Tala had spoken, calm, thoughtful, rooted in tradition. He sensed the slab was part of something larger beneath the surface. The surveyor leader sighed and pointed to the slab. "Well, it's interesting, but it won't stop construction." Caleb felt a cold twist of worry. The town did not see what he saw. To them, it was simply an object. To him, it was a message. One of the workers pulled another tool from his bag and tapped the ground around the slab. As he pressed lightly, the earth beneath gave a hollow sound. He paused in surprise and tapped again. Hollow. The realization spread quickly among the workers and spectators. "Maybe there's a chamber under here," someone said. "Or a tunnel. Or old storage?" The guesses grew louder and more imaginative. But none of them were correct. Caleb knew that. Before the workers could begin digging, a quiet voice called out from behind the crowd. "Stop." Everyone turned. Tala stood at the edge of the group, calm and steady. Her presence alone brought the talking to a hush. She approached the slab slowly. Her eyes filled with a gentle warning. "What you uncovered is not meant to be opened," she said softly. The survey leader frowned. "Ma'am, we respect your people's history, but we can't halt our work because of a stone." Tala looked at him with patient understanding. "This is not simply a stone. It marks a resting place." A murmur spread among the crowd. Resting place meant many things to many people. Some imagined burial grounds. Others thought of old shelters or ceremonial sites. Caleb noticed worry forming in a few faces, but excitement still outweighed caution. "We have rules to follow," the surveyor insisted. "If this area contains remains, we'll document them. But our route won't change unless we have proof of something dangerous. Tala's expression remained calm. Some truths cannot be explained in your books, she said gently. But they still matter. The survey leader stepped back toward the slab. We can't rely on stories. We need facts. He signaled the workers to continue. As they prepared their tools, a sudden wind swept across the canyon, sharp and unexpected. The air shifted from warm to cool in seconds. Hats blew off, dust swirled, and people shielded their eyes against the gusts. Caleb felt Willow stir nervously behind him. The wind grew stronger, whistling through the canyon walls with a hollow tone that made the hairs on Caleb's arms rise. The sky did not darken, and there were no signs of a storm, only this sudden, powerful wind that didn't behave like normal weather. Dust spiraled upward in soft, swirling columns, dancing around the engraved slab. A few surveyors stepped back in surprise. Some townspeople murmured nervously. A child clutched his mother's hand. Tala did not move. She stood still, her eyes fixed on the slab, her expression calm but knowing. The wind lasted only a minute, but when it stopped, everything fell into a deep, unnatural quiet. The kind of quiet that made people look at one another, unsure what they had just experienced. No one was hurt, nothing was damaged, but something had changed. The survey leader swallowed and forced a laugh, trying to restore confidence. Just a gust, he said. Let's get back to work. But his voice trembled slightly. Caleb stepped forward. This isn't normal, he said softly. Maybe we should pause. Listen. A few townspeople nodded hesitantly. Others looked confused. Tala turned to the group, her voice gentle but clear. The land speaks when it needs to be heard. Not to frighten you, but to remind you to be careful. The survey leader rubbed the back of his neck, uncertain. He finally signaled everyone to take a break while he reassessed the situation. People murmured quietly as they walked away from the slab. Some looked shaken. Some looked curious. But all of them looked thoughtful. Caleb approached Tala. Was that because of the slab? Tala nodded slightly. It was a warning. The land does not want to be disturbed. Caleb felt a quiet determination growing within him. The townspeople had witnessed something they could not explain. And even if they tried to dismiss it, they would remember it. This was the truth Tala had spoken about, the kind that could not be forced on people but revealed gently, in a way that touched their senses and not just their minds. He looked back at the canyon, its walls glowing softly in the fading afternoon light. Something old lived in that silence. Not harmful, but sacred. And now, it had made itself known. The conflict in the town had only just begun. But Caleb sensed this moment was the turning point, the moment when belief started shifting, even if only a little. He stood beside Tala, understanding for the first time that he was not just a witness. He was now a part of this unfolding story, whether he had asked to be or not. The strange wind at the canyon changed something in the hearts of the people of Red Crossing, even if they did not admit it out loud. For the next several days, the surveyors kept a respectful distance from the engraved stone. They worked on other parts of the land first, measuring hills and open fields, marking paths that pointed toward the canyon but stopped just short of it. They tried to stay confident, but a quiet hesitation followed them like a long shadow. Every time the wind rustled the grass, someone glanced nervously toward the canyon walls. Caleb felt the shift too. Life at the ranch continued with feeding animals, checking fences, and repairing small things around the barn. But his routines no longer felt ordinary. The air carried a sense of waiting, like the land knew more was coming. He found himself riding to the canyon more often than before, not to explore but simply to sit and listen. The silence there had changed. It still felt deep and old, but now there was also a soft hum beneath it, something living quietly inside the stillness. One warm afternoon, as Caleb was repairing a gate near the creek, he heard someone calling his name. He turned to see Mr. Keaton, one of the survey workers, riding toward him with a slow, careful pace. Keaton was usually cheerful, always talking about new building projects and railway plans, but today, his face looked pale and his smile weak. "Afternoon, Keaton," Caleb greeted him gently. Everything all right? The man shook his head a little. Not exactly. One of our men isn't feeling too good. Thought I'd ask if you noticed anything unusual about the land out there. Caleb paused, leaning an elbow on the gate. What kind of unwell? Oh, nothing serious, Keaton said quickly, raising his hands as if trying to calm the air between them. Just tired. Lightheaded. Maybe the sun. Maybe dust. Maybe he didn't sleep well. Caleb nodded but did not speak. Keaton sighed. It's just... He started feeling off right after he worked near that stone. He glanced toward the canyon as though he could see it from where they stood. The rest of the men won't say it, but they're uneasy. Ah, Caleb wiped his hands on his shirt. I think the land is telling you to slow down, he said softly. Some places need more care than others. Keaton swallowed. That Apache woman, Tala, she came again. Told us the same thing. Said the place is meant to stay quiet. Not disturbed. Caleb gently adjusted a loose hinge on the gate and spoke without looking at Keaton. She's right. Keaton rubbed his forehead. But the town leaders won't hear it. They want progress, and they want it fast. Caleb understood. The town had grown tired of being overlooked. Nearby cities were expanding, and people in Red Crossing feared being left behind. They believed the railroad could bring a new future, fresh businesses, new families, more life than they currently had. It was difficult to ask people to slow down when hope came in the shape of rails and engines. Later that evening, Caleb rode into town to buy feed. When he walked into the general store, he found a group of townspeople gathered near the counter, speaking in low, serious voices. They stopped when Caleb stepped inside. Mrs. Tyndall, the storekeeper, looked worried. Caleb, she said softly, is it true that something out there made a surveyor sick? Caleb hesitated. He wanted to speak carefully. He's not seriously ill, he said gently. Just worn down. But the land is trying to tell us something. Some of the townspeople exchanged uncertain looks. Mr. Harland, the merchant who had been most excited about the railroad, stepped forward. Caleb, we can't let a few strange gusts of wind and old rock stop progress. You know that. Caleb kept his voice calm. It's not about stopping progress. It's about respecting what was here before any of us. Harland sighed deeply. Do you understand what the railroad means to us? New customers. New opportunities. Families won't have to move away to find better work. We need this. Caleb nodded. I know. Then why stand in the way? Harland asked, frustration rising in his voice, though still without anger. Caleb looked around the store. Everyone was staring at him, hoping for an explanation that made sense, something simple, something clear. But the truth wasn't simple. It was layered, quiet, old. I'm not trying to stand in the way, Caleb said softly. But some land is meant to stay peaceful. If we disturb it, we may not understand the consequences. Harland shook his head, unable to accept the idea. Stories, he muttered. But a woman near the shelves spoke up. We all felt that strange wind, she said. And what about the stone? That wasn't normal. A few others nodded. Caleb noticed something new in their eyes, respect mixed with worry. Harland raised his hands. Even if we believe it's special, what do we tell the railroad company? That a mysterious stone told us to change the route? The room fell silent. Caleb took a deep breath. Maybe the company needs to hear it from more than just one voice. Maybe they need to hear it from everyone. Hola. That suggestion filled the room with thoughtful stillness. For the first time, Caleb saw people considering the canyon not as an obstacle, but as something important, something deserving of care. The next morning, Caleb visited Tala. She was seated near a small grove of trees, sorting herbs into neatly tied bundles. She looked up when she heard his horse approach, her expression soft and knowing. You spoke with the town, she said gently. Yes, Caleb replied. Some are starting to understand. Some are not. Tala tied another bundle. Understanding comes slowly, like water, shaping stone. Her words brought Caleb a kind of comfort. He dismounted and sat on a nearby fallen log. Is there anything more I can do? Tala studied him for a moment. There is truth you have not heard yet. Perhaps knowing it will help you guide others. Caleb listened with full attention as she continued. A long time ago, Tala began, our people used that land as a place of rest. Not because of danger, but because it needed to stay quiet. The ground holds memories of old gatherings, old illnesses, and old healing. The silence protects what remains. She paused, letting the meaning sink in. Our people promised never to disturb it again, she said softly. Not out of fear, but out of respect. The promise was passed through generations. Caleb nodded slowly. It made sense now, the engraved stone, the stillness, the strange wind. The land was teaching caution, protecting something delicate. But why didn't you tell the town sooner? He asked gently. Tala met his gaze with calm clarity. Some truths must be spoken at the right time. If spoken too early, they are ignored. If spoken too late, they cannot help. We spoke when the land spoke. Now it is time for you to speak with us. Caleb felt the weight of her words settle on him. He wasn't a leader, but people listened to him because of his steady nature. Maybe that was why the story had unfolded around him. The following day, Red Crossing held a community meeting outside the town hall. People stood in small circles, whispering about the stone, the wind, the surveyor who had fallen unwell, and the uneasy feeling that had settled over the canyon. The survey team was there too, along with the town council. Caleb felt nervous as he stepped forward. He wasn't used to speaking to crowds. His voice was usually heard in quiet conversations or simple greetings. But today was different. He spoke slowly, clearly, from the heart. This land remembers things, he said. It holds stories that were here long before any of us. The canyon isn't a place to build through. It's a place to leave alone. The signs were gentle. A stone, a wind, a reminder. If we don't listen now, we may regret it later. The crowd listened with surprising stillness. Tala stepped forward next, speaking softly but confidently. She explained the history of the land, without sharing anything private or sacred. Only what the town needed to understand. She spoke of respect, peace, and the promise her community had carried for generations. By the time she finished, the mood had shifted again. More people nodded now. More understood. Even Harland, though still unsure, looked less stubborn and more thoughtful. Finally, the survey leader stepped up. He cleared his throat. We're required to report everything we find. And with what's been uncovered here, I'm going to recommend the company consider another route. A collective sigh of relief spread through the group. Harland asked quietly, and if they refuse? The survey leader shrugged. Then I'll remind them of something simple. Sometimes the land says no. And when land says no, smart people listen. Caleb looked to Tala. She met his eyes with a calm smile, small, warm, full of gratitude. The tension between town and canyon had not completely vanished, but something important had happened. Understanding. A bridge had formed between two worlds that once stood apart, and Caleb realized that he, a quiet rancher who rarely raised his voice, had become the center of that bridge simply because he had chosen to listen. When the survey leader announced that he would recommend a new route, a soft ripple of relief moved through Red Crossing. People didn't cheer loudly, but they exchanged relieved glances, gentle smiles, and slow nods, as if a heavy weight had been lifted without anyone realizing how heavy it truly was. The tension that had followed the canyon's edge like a quiet shadow finally began to ease. Still, the town was not free of worry. The final decision rested with the railroad company, and no one knew how long it would take for them to respond. Some townspeople felt hopeful that their concerns would be respected. Others feared the company would ignore them and push forward anyway. Yet even with the uncertainty, something important had changed. People were now willing to listen to the land. Caleb returned to his ranch after the meeting, feeling lighter than he had in days. He brushed Willow slowly, letting the horse's steady breathing soothe the last of his nerves. The sun was setting when he finished, filling the sky with warm shades of orange and pink. For a long moment, Caleb leaned against the barn door and watched the sky soften into evening. He felt peaceful in a way he hadn't felt since the surveyors first arrived. Later that night, as he sat by the small lamp on his table, he found himself thinking back to the very first day he saw Tala near the canyon ridge. Her quiet warning had seemed mysterious then, almost like a story from another world. But now it felt like the beginning of something that had unfolded step by step, showing its meaning at the right time. Caleb realized that his life, which had always followed a simple rhythm, had become richer because he dared to listen and understand something beyond his usual world. 2 days later, as Caleb was tending his cattle, he saw a thin line of dust rising from the distant road. A wagon approached, moving steadily across the open land. He rode closer out of curiosity. When the wagon stopped near his fence, the survey leader stepped down, carrying a rolled letter in his hand. "Morning, Mr. Morton," the man said with a tired but hopeful smile. "Thought I'd bring the news myself." Caleb's heart beat faster. "And what did they decide?" Quote, the man handed him the letter. "They agreed. The route will shift south, away from the canyon." Caleb let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you," he said sincerely. The survey leader nodded. "Honestly, after everything I've seen here, it feels like the right thing to do." He hesitated, then added with a thoughtful smile, "It's rare for land to speak. When it does, we should listen." Caleb appreciated the man's words. It meant a great deal that someone from outside the town had come to understand. Before the man rode away, he added gently. Caleb watched the wagon disappear into the sunlight, feeling a warm sense of gratitude for the decision. Not only for himself, but for Tala, for her community, and for the land that had been protected. When the news reached Red Crossing, reactions were mixed at first. A few merchants looked disappointed, knowing the southern route would be farther from town than they hoped, but even they could not deny the growing peace that settled over the community. Many residents felt proud that they had chosen respect over convenience. Some even joked that perhaps the canyon had simply made the decision for them. As days passed, tensions faded. People returned to their routines, but with a new sense of appreciation for the land they lived on. The canyon, once seen as just another empty stretch of rock and silence, now held meaning quiet, deep, and shared by both the Apache community and the settlers. Caleb rode to the canyon often, not to watch for trouble, but simply to enjoy its stillness. It felt different now, as if acknowledging his presence, or perhaps Caleb had changed, and now he could feel what had always been there. One warm afternoon, Tala returned to the ridge where Caleb first met her. She stood with her hands clasped loosely in front of her, watching the sunlight trace gentle patterns across the canyon walls. Caleb approached quietly, and she turned with a small smile. "The railroad has chosen another path," Caleb said. Tala nodded. "I know. Our elders were told this morning. They are grateful." Caleb looked out across the land. "I'm glad the town listened." Tala's eyes softened. "Your voice mattered. You helped them hear." Caleb felt a quiet warmth in his chest. "I only spoke what felt true." "Truth is powerful," she said gently, even when spoken softly. They walked a short distance together, stopping near a small outcrop of smooth stones. The canyon below stretched wide and silent, its floor hidden in shade. From above, the space felt peaceful, almost like a breath held in gentle patience. After a moment, Tala spoke again. "There is something your town may not understand yet. Some places do not need to be explained for their value to be real. Some places simply ask to be respected." Caleb nodded. "I understand that now." Tala looked at him thoughtfully. "You listened from the beginning. That is why the land trusted you." Her words were simple, but they settled deeply in Caleb's heart. He had never thought of himself in such a way. He had only tried to do what felt right, yet sometimes the simplest intentions made the greatest difference. In the weeks that followed, people from Red Crossing began visiting the canyon, not to disturb it, but to quietly admire it. Families walked toward the edge during calm evenings, watching how the light changed along the rocks. Children listened with interest as adults spoke of respecting the land. And some nodded when Caleb mentioned Tala's teachings, even if they did not fully understand them. A gentle bond formed between the town and the Apache community. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, but steady and meaningful. Members of the Apache band sometimes visited the town market to share baskets, beads, and herbs. Town residents greeted them with new warmth, understanding that they were neighbors with deep history, not strangers passing through. Caleb noticed these changes with quiet satisfaction. The tension that once divided the two communities had softened into a respectful understanding. Not perfect, not complete, but real. One late afternoon, as Caleb stood near his barn watching the sunset, Mr. Harland approached on foot. The merchant looked thoughtful, carrying a small wrapped package. "Caleb," Harland began slowly, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened." Caleb turned to him, patient as always. "I was too focused on what I wanted," Harland admitted. "Didn't think much about what the land needed, or what was important to others." He held out the package. "This is just a small thanks for speaking when the rest of us didn't know how." Caleb accepted the gesture with modest surprise. Inside the package was a simple wooden carving of a canyon ridge, smooth, handmade, and beautiful in its quiet detail. "Thank you, Harland," Caleb said softly. "But I didn't do it alone." Harland nodded. "Maybe not. But someone had to start the conversation." As Harland walked away, Caleb looked down at the carving. It captured the canyon just as he saw it now. Not a barrier, not an obstacle, but a reminder of patience and respect, a reminder of old promises and new understanding. Later that evening, Caleb placed the carving on a shelf inside his home, where the soft lamplight touched it gently. It was a symbol of something rare, a moment when a whole town changed because people chose to listen instead of push forward blindly. Red Crossing did not become a major stop on the railroad. No crowds filled its streets. No new businesses appeared overnight. But the town grew in quieter ways that were more meaningful. People began noticing the beauty around them more often. They shared stories, respected boundaries, and walked with a sense of connection to the land that had always supported them. The canyon remained undisturbed, standing silently as it had for ages. And because it stayed at peace, so did the communities around it. Tala continued to visit Caleb now and then, sometimes to talk, sometimes simply to share a moment of stillness beside the canyon's edge. Their friendship deepened in quiet ways through understanding, through shared respect, through the simple belief that listening brings wisdom. As seasons passed, the story of the strange wind and the engraved stone became part of local memory. Parents told their children, "There is a place near our town that must always be treated gently." And children grew up knowing that some lands speak without sound. When people remembered the moment that changed everything, they often thought of the soft words spoken by an Apache woman. "That is forbidden." Not forbidden in anger, not forbidden in fear, only in respect. And they remembered the rancher who listened. Caleb Morton never saw himself as a hero. He still woke early, fed his animals, repaired fences, and lived a quiet life. But the town knew the truth. His understanding had helped protect something precious, something older than any of them. In time, the canyon became more than a part of the landscape. It became a symbol of balance between past and present, between tradition and progress, between stories and the people who choose to honor them. And Red Crossing was never quite the same again. It became calmer, kinder, and more aware. A place where the land was not just lived on, but respected. A place where listening mattered, and in the heart of it stood the rancher who understood, and the woman who whispered the truth that shook the whole town, not with fear, but with wisdom and peace.